Good morning. It's October 1st, 2022, Saturday morning. I'm normally working early in the morning, but today I got to wait for the auto inspection to open up. While I am doing that, I wanted to talk about last night's Texas governor debate between our current governor, the worthless, good for nothing Gestapo Greg Abbott, versus his opponent who's trying to take his job, Beto O'Rourke, Robert Francis O'Rourke. That's his actual name. I gotta say, after watching it last night, everything that I needed to see was there. You know, Abbott was doing his finger pointing and blame game, while O'Rourke was continuously pointing out how everything is shot to hell under Abbott's watch, under Greg Abbott's watch. Sorry, I didn't get much sleep last night. I seriously doubt I'm going to be working the rest of the day. But that aside, I want to focus on the main thing about that debate, because everything else will fall into place afterwards. Taking back what they said throughout the time of the debate, the questionnaires were bringing up file footages of what both candidates were talking about, were saying actually, and it wasn't really talking about anything in particular. It was just a quote or two that was brought up based off of what they said in the past. And what I've noticed was candidate O'Rourke, Beto O'Rourke, he was wording himself. He was rewording himself. You know, in the past he said defund the police was a great idea. Even I said it. You know, and I'm still sticking to my guns that defund the police is not the same as dismantle. You know, the only thing defund the police was for getting rid of all of the crap that was spent on taxpaying dollars on that's still worthless to this day. You know, riot gear and anti-terrorist crap and all this other garbage, and, you know, stuff that was brought up during 9/11, after 9/11, the 9/11 incident, that has been completely worthless and is of no use to this day. So that's what defund the police was about. That's millions of dollars that could actually be going to the police. The way Governor Greg Abbott says, all these millions are going to the police, which is just total BS. You know, it's a couple of million to a department here or there. No, technically it's a couple of hundreds of thousands of dollars, up to $700,000 to a certain county, for everybody in charge of those counties to spread the wealth amongst themselves, as opposed to actually putting the millions of dollars to good use for our law enforcement. You know, and Beto O'Rourke, he had to take it back about defund the police and all this other stuff, because these days it's still confused for dismantling the police, which is just incorrect. But that's how it is. So he had to reword himself a lot. He had to say that he's for funding the police, but also going to the right police, as well as punishing the police who are not putting that money to good use, as well as punishing the police for abuse of the law. Okay. Sorry about that. Ooh, they go fast. Now, what I noticed about Greg Abbott is that he stuck to his guns with dodging any kind of subject and just going straight to the finger pointing and the blame game. Talking about defund the police and law enforcement. He's made these claims that he's written out all these bills for the police and the law enforcement, and he's also punishing all of the cops that abuse their authority and all this other crap. When it's just not true. If there's any cop to get busted for anything, it's child pornography, and even still, possession of child pornography, and even still, the governor hasn't done squat in punishing the law enforcement. The law enforcement just gets pushed over to the side. Their cases get pushed over to the side, and Greg Abbott says, no, it's taken care of. As opposed to something what O'Rourke wants to do, which is, punish the cops no differently than they do criminals for being cops that perform criminal acts. That speaks volumes. That alone speaks volumes, So, as far as taking back what they said, did Greg Abbott said, yeah, defund the police was great? Yes, he did. But now that he's got a chance to run the governorship, well, you could see clearly he's changed his mind on that. And, more power to him. I hope he wins. He needs to get in the governor's race. He needs to live up to what he's promised. Gun reform. He said he wanted to remove all these combative weapons back in 2018. They quoted him as during the time that he was running for presidency, and he said, "Hell yes, I want to remove them because these combat weaponry and all this stuff doesn't belong in the thing. And if I can remove it, if removing it means preventing so much mass killings and mass shootings, then hell yes, I want to remove the combative weapons." Now after bringing that up from 2018, back when his people were, well, it wasn't so much citizens, it was just a mass shooting that took place in his neighborhood. Got him so riled up that he spoke passionate and all this good stuff. But you saw a completely different guy on this. You saw a more professional leveled guy, where he says he wants to work with the gun control and all this good stuff concerning the background checks and all these other things that come with gun control. What I would have liked to have seen, don't get me wrong, it was important to hear him say that. But what I would have liked to have seen was him referring to that gun control, the background check, the mental check, and all this good stuff. No differently than any other kind of safety procedure. Pretty much like the way that I say it. Every single one of those policies and procedures and steps that would be incorporated or just plain legislated, they help. They help in stopping and preventing mass shootings from people that want to kill in mass killings. No differently than the regulations for people that wanted to learn how to fly. They now have to go through extensive background checks and mental cases. And it's proven to be a fantastic way of keeping everybody safe. After all, how many more planes were used to kill people in mass killings at a terroristic level? Not a lot. Not since those preventative measures were installed. And the same thing, out of that same analogy, could be used out of gun control. Not to say that that's going to stop anything, but full well it's not going to make it easy for every single terrorist that has every intent to kill. Regardless as to whether or not they do it anyway. That's not the point. The point is that every single one of those rules and hoops that people got to jump through and all this good stuff, You know, every single one of those things prevents mass killings. Plain and simple. Plain and simple. And that's the kind of go after, punch you in the gut kind of talk that I wanted to hear from O'Rourke. Unfortunately, because he still has to appease all of my fellow Texas, all of my Texas, you know, who's just so easily scared and all this other crap, and go with the Republican flow. You know, he had to ease off on that. He just kept on pointing out that he wants to put those things into law, all of the restrictions into law and regulations, and that was it. Meanwhile, Greg Abbott was just talking about how he wants to take away their guns, wants to take your guns away, and all this other crap. Martial law. I mean, he didn't say martial law, but he might as well have. And I'm thinking he avoided that just simply because of how stupid he would have sounded. But yeah, Abbott played it smart by saying he wants to make sure that everybody has a right to own a gun. You know? And that was it. Hold on, there's somebody honking a horn. I'll go ahead and rescript this. I still got time on my side. I'm going to drive over and see if everything's okay with this guy here. It's quite possible he fell asleep behind the wheel. Oh, he stopped. Okay. Yeah. There's too much tint on the windows. But this guy who was just parked just a little while ago has his lights on now. I don't know if you can see it in the background. Right there. Now the lights are off. I don't know if he set off the alarm or what. I think he's all I know is that I've occasionally myself have fallen asleep behind the wheel, and he's parked kind of crooked. And even the Mustang, there's a Mustang that just passed by, and even he pulled over to see how he was doing. I'm thinking the drunkard just, you know, accidentally left his hand or head on the wheel and is asleep. No, it's cool. It's cool. I mean, you know, totally understandable. But that's how it is when you're doing when your studio is in your car. You know, you just see all these wacky things. As a rideshare driver, you see wacky things. So I'm going to keep recording just in case, turns out there's an alien in there and I can point it out. I'll turn the camera your way. Yeah, both of these candidates were trying to take back what they said in the past, walk back and try to reword themselves. Beto did the most successful, he was more successful at it. You know, to top it all off, what I've also noticed was the testimony that took place, from 2 years, 3 years back, 4 years, if it's far back as 2018, it was about 3 to 4 years back, times have changed since then. Emotions ran very high, every quote that was brought up by Greg Abbott was recent. For example, the mass shooting that took place earlier this year at Robb Elementary School in Uvalde, Texas, Greg Abbott was questioned, why did you say, hey, it could have been worse, you know? And you know, which is true. That's what he said. And Abbott was real quick to saying, you know, that he received information about how many kids that did not die and all this stuff, and it was just in that sort of manner that he was saying that it could have been worse. He wasn't really saying, he wasn't telling the victims' families, to lighten up, and I understand that. But as you see if you were to ever Google the official speech, you would know full well that telling people to lighten up is exactly what he was trying to do. He was trying to tell people to keep the faith and all this stuff and lighten up and everything. But the majority of my Texas is going to believe what he says, because this is what politicians do. They just reword themselves to where, they get out of trouble. And it's even more so here in Texas, here in this Republican state. Now, O'Rourke, he'd reword his stuff, but he didn't really walk back on it. He still implied that he has every intention to going after the combative weapons. But he never actually said it. He didn't say it directly. And that's the thing that caught my attention also, that is going to be brought up here in during the job. It's going to be brought up elsewhere. It's probably going to be in the campaign political ads, But O'Rourke did exactly what I needed to see him do, Oops. Oh, never mind. O'Rourke did exactly what I needed to see him do. And that was call on Greg Abbott about gun reform, gun control, and all this other stuff. 8 years he's been in office, and he had every opportunity to put regulations on gun control to prevent and complicate those that wanted to do some mass killings with their guns. They had all the time in the world. He had 8 years. And the only thing that Abbott did was guarantee a gun in everybody's hand overnight, even if they were mentally unfit for it. And that's wrong. And that's exactly what I wanted to see O'Rourke state. I wanted Beto to make sure that he reminds everybody that all of this crap that went on with people that did these killings, mass killings, cop killings, is all done under Greg Abbott's watch. And that's where he stood out and delivered. Abortion, same thing. Everything about O'Rourke, about Republicans are trying to take away women's rights and all this stuff. Technically, he could still stand his ground on that. But the questionnaires tried asking him, well, what's the time that abortion should be illegal? And he did the right thing. As far as I'm concerned, he did the right thing in saying follow the Roe versus Wade procedures and steps. That's what he stands by. That's what America should stand by. It's what Texas should stand by, and all this stuff. And it makes sense. It's a regulation that's been formed already. There's a bunch of regulations in Roe v. Wade that have already been formed to determine the best type and at the best time an abortion should be done. Quick and hastily procedure, down to the let's take our time, let's slow it down, and let's work with this procedure and making sure that the host still stays healthy for the next time that she tries to give birth to a child. Okay? All of those regulations and rules and stipulations and conditions and policies and procedures and processes, all of those have already been formed through Roe v. Wade. So for O'Rourke to say, hey, look, I just want to go by those standards, when the questionnaire says you're opposed to Greg Abbott's methods, who says it's wrong and because life begins at conception and all this good stuff, you say freedom of choice, but at what point does freedom of choice not apply? At what time is it time to say, I'm sorry, but that baby has to be born, it cannot be aborted? At what time is the time to not go with the abortion? And again, O'Rourke said, follow the Roe v. Wade. That's the standards that I'm going, and I support it, and I think that's the best way to go, because it's been in law since the 70s or 50s, I think, and or 70s, I think, and it should be it should be upheld, and it should be put into place, and everybody should go by those guidelines. And that's the best thing that he said about that. That's the professionalism that we also needed to see. Instead of him crying, complaining, cursing out Greg Abbott, cursing at somebody else, saying, F the haters and all this stuff. It was cool back when he was doing his speech and all this good stuff. His rallies. It was cool at his rallies. But we really needed to see him stay professional as a candidate, to let us know that he can be professional as a governor. Okay, it's just that important to see. And it was very predictable, and it was exactly what we imagined when Abbott did nothing but finger point and blame. Abbott's claiming well, life begins at conception and I don't believe it and all this good stuff. And the question was, why is it that a 10-year-old have to leave her home state of Ohio to go to Indiana to get an abortion because she was a pregnated, sexually trespassed 10-year-old, and your method, your policy says you're going to try to prevent rape before it even happens, so that way there will be no 10-year-olds going to get an abortion, and all this good stuff. And he says, well, I believe life begins at conception. That's not answering the question. It's not even touching the subject, so back to taking back what they had said. There's a difference again between Greg Abbott and Beto O'Rourke. Beto O'Rourke reworded himself and remodulated himself, despite the fact that some points hinted that he still has every intention of going after the combative weapons, and flat out said, hey, just go with Roe v. Wade. Those are the procedures, and that's fine. Beto O'Rourke reworded himself big time into a professional leader that we need to see out of a professional political leader. Greg Abbott just dodged the main subject that he was asked. He never answered any of his questions. Didn't even insinuate that he's going to stay the same and all this other stuff. He just plain dodged the questions and finger pointed and name blamed. But yeah, the issues went from that to gun control to immigration. El Paso went through a couple of complications, but never really did the harshness that Greg Abbott did. He wants to claim that because El Paso had bused migrants to sanctuary cities, that Greg Abbott was in the right, that Greg Abbott was correct and all this stuff all along. Except more than likely there wasn't any kind of complications to O'Rourke's or El Paso's busings. The mess was definitely made and by the Trump era, but it was continued by Greg Abbott. Okay. There's a whole lot of difference between cooperation with sanctuary cities and just plain making a mess with sanctuary cities. And that's something that I wished O'Rourke had stated right from the get-go. He sort of implied it as opposed to actually flat out stating it. And I think that was a point against him. Okay, a point taken away against him. He should have just flat out said, those migrants have identities, and when they go to the sanctuary cities that they're sent to, they will know what they've got. He should have also stated that if it's true that El Paso bust migrants, he should have asked the mayor if that mayor told the sanctuary city that the bus was going to, that here comes the bus, as opposed to everybody guessing, well, is the bus going over here? Is the bus going over there? How many? Who are these people? Have they been quarantined for coronavirus? Have they been background checked? All of those questions need to be answered. And it's the responsibility of whoever it is that's busing those migrants to answer them. And I really, 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 really wished O'Rourke had made that clear. Because it's a part of what makes the immigration problem, immigration issue such a mess. Greg Abbott completely, I still stand by this. Greg Abbott says Biden is responsible for all the chaos down at the border, and Beto O'Rourke wants to back him up on it, which is total bullcrap. Because as I've stated, as somebody that's actually taken trips, rideshare trips down to the border towns along with rest of Texas, there's no chaos going on over there. There's no cops being killed by migrants or illegal felons. There's no people being broken into and invaded by migrants. This is all that damage down there. What damage? You look up any of the file footage of all the migrants in action coming through. They're climbing over fences and not breaking them because the fences are made of metal. They're pulling apart barbed wire so that way they could slip through without getting snagged by the barb of the barbed wire. And they're passing along through territories. At most, it's an illegal trespass, which is a misdemeanor. There's no chaos. There's no damage. There's no burnt crops. There's no destroyed crops plucked, ravaged through. You get more damage at your crops by wild hogs than you do migrants. Okay? There's no slaughtered cattle. I still stand by that. Nobody's filed a report. There's no pictures of anybody killed. There's no any of those game cameras that are out there that record migrants staggering, desperate for hydration, passing in front of those game cameras. There's no recording from those cameras of any cattle being slaughtered. There's no recording from those cameras of any crops being destroyed. Not by migrants, by wild hogs maybe, but not by migrants. By deer, sure, I believe it, but not by migrants. And that's something that I wish Beto O'Rourke had knocked him down with. And don't get me wrong, O'Rourke did good still. Talking about the functionalities and the organizations that was needed. The organization, not so much the organizations, because the organizations were there from the very beginning. But the organization itself, that was needed. And without Abbott's support, that's what they had to go with whatever it was, which was just basically Abbott not supporting them in any way, shape, or form. If the governor had done anything to be more organized with the volunteer centers that were already quarantining and processing migrants, this wouldn't have even been a problem. It would have been handled so much more smoother. And that's the thing that Greg Abbott wound up saying. That Beto O'Rourke wound up saying. I'm very tired. I only had about 3 hours sleep. That's the thing that O'Rourke was saying. I just wish he had hit him in the gut a little bit more harder than that. I wish he had punched Abbott in the gut a little bit more harder than that. I wish he would have said that all that so-called chaos is also under Greg Abbott's watch. If he could have just reminded everybody, that this isn't done by Biden. Let's say open border policy was actually being done by Biden. If the governor had cooperated with every single volunteer organization all the way up to the government agencies, there wouldn't have been any kind of chaos and product that it technically still isn't even there. What everybody's complaining about down at the border is that they're having to do more paperwork. They're not shooting anybody, rescuing people. They're not stopping any terroristic attacks. None of that is being done. It's just the law enforcement being done with more paperwork than they can or care to handle, and saying that it's all Biden's fault. And Beto wants to back him up on this. That's all that's going on. Cries for help. We're overwhelmed. It's an invasion. No, it's not. Again, there's no crops being destroyed. There's no, not by immigrants, by hogs, yeah. And deer. But there's no cattle being slaughtered. There's no cops getting killed. There's no families being destroyed. Beto did fine as far as staying professional. I just wish he had hit a little harder by reminding everybody that it was all on Greg Abbott's watch. And Greg Abbott, same old babbling bullcrap. Same old bullcrap. Finger pointing, name blaming, and then saying, praise Jesus, I'm starting to feel it. I'm getting very tired. I might need to close my nap. I might need to take a nap and close my eyes. So, I'm probably going to be touching on the subject again, mostly through the podcast, because the podcast doesn't take so long in downloading the way it does on YouTube. But if everybody remembers the podcast, anchor.fm/Chris-comments. If everybody remembers that, I'll go ahead and put that in the description below. Go to the podcast, the audio only podcast. Either later on today after I've gotten some sleep, or tomorrow after I've gotten a full day's rest. But yeah, I'll definitely be pointing it out bit by bit, subject by subject, a whole lot better than the way I'm doing right now. I'm doing this right now because, again, I'm just waiting for the vehicle inspection to open up. And I got to get my registration renewed. I'm a rideshare driver. You always have to keep that up to date. If you don't keep it up to date, they close the account on you until you do get it up to date. And, of course, with all this high cost of living and inflation, I really can't afford to be missing too many days of work. So, wish me luck. Y'all take care. Y'all take it easy. This is Chris with Chris's Comments, signing out.